Hi, I'm Emily Hargrove and welcome to Prime. So today's show, we're going to be talking about American icons, about two men in particular, Dr. Martin Luther King and Stanley Marcus, both of whom come from completely different backgrounds, but both had a profound impact on not only North America, but also the world. Our first guest today is the wonderful Dr. Larry Allums from the Dallas Institute of Humanities and Culture. He is going to join us to talk about the Martin Luther King Symposium that's happening on Monday night at the Winspear Opera House. So Larry, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to talk to you about the Martin Luther King Symposium on Monday first, well, a little bit later actually, but first, what I want to do is talk about Dr. King and give us an overview of his life, and then we can talk about the symposium.
All right. Well, of course, everybody knows him, right? I mean, he's the only individual for whom a national holiday has been proclaimed. I mean, George Washington's birthday is now called President's Day. Right? So Martin Luther King Jr. is unique. And actually, it was very controversial when Reagan signed the bill that established that national holiday. But maybe one of the most remarkable things about Dr. King to know is, or to remember, is just how young he was when he did everything he did.
Right.
You know, he was a young phenomenon. He had his doctorate and was established in his first pastorate by the time he was 25.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he was always precocious. He was always very ambitious. He came from a family in which those traits were true. And then he got thrown right into the cauldron when he came to the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, from Atlanta. He was, encouraged, even begged not to leave Atlanta, to take over Ebenezer Baptist Church from his father, who was also a great preacher, but he wanted to strike out on his own, and so that's what he did. He went to Montgomery, and he was there during the Montgomery bus boycott, which really did start the whole civil rights movement.
Right, and so he bucked the trend right from the beginning in terms of he went against what his father said, and then from there on out he did, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now one of the interesting things about Dr. King was that he also had those sort of orthodox ambitions. He wanted to be a great scholar. He was incredibly brilliant. He wanted to be philosophical. He wanted to write books and be a teacher and things like that. I mean, he had all these ambitions, and the civil rights movement got in the way. And so if you think about the fact that he was 25 when he took his first pastorate during that very crucial time in Montgomery, Alabama, until he was killed in 1968, that was 14 years. He was 39 years old when he died. So he accomplished all that in just a very brief amount of time.
I mean, doing the research about it, it really blew my mind. Because back in England, for some unfathomable reason, in the school, we don't study the civil rights movement. It's North America, it very much happened over here. So learning about it has been really wonderful for me, particularly now living in Texas and what the South had to deal with. And so, what really struck me was when he set up the Southern Leadership Christian Conference.
Southern Christian Leadership. SCLC.
SCLC, right.
And that came out of the efforts of the Montgomery bus boycott, which lasted a long, long time. I mean, in terms of all the African Americans in Montgomery declining to ride the buses, during that time after Rosa Parks was arrested in December of 1955. And but after that, then there was momentum, and so there had to be a way to keep that momentum going. And this is Dr. King and others formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, other black and white leaders.
Oh, so white leaders were involved in that as well?
A few, yes.
Wow, they must have gone against.
See, that's one of the things that Dr. King always had to fight against, was the complacency of many in the African American community who were complacent and wanted things to stay status quo, just like the white community did, that is to say segregation. But there were always a few white people who went with him wherever he, and as a matter of fact, some of them advised him how to do things and how to go, you know, what to do. And so they were very important.
I would love to read the stories from those white leaders. Because
well, you know, when he, maybe he's most known for the "I Have a Dream" speech, of course, which happened on August 28th of 1963. That's the one that filled up the mall in Washington D.C. And you know, we all know about that. But probably the best thing, at least in my opinion, that he ever wrote, and he wrote this rather than spoke it, was the letter from Birmingham jail. Earlier in that same year, 1963, after he'd been jailed, and he wrote that, well, that was to the black ministers who told him, we have to wait. So, you know, he was rebuking those black ministers for not joining in this protest movement, this civil rights movement that was gaining steam at that time.
Oh, interesting. Well, the I Have a Dream speech, I think, originally it was called Normalcy No More.
Yeah, terrible, isn't it?
Yes.
You know.
But I mean, that's what happened though, isn't it? I mean, normalcy was no more.
Was no more, that's right. And actually, the whole I Have a Dream speech has an interesting history and context even today. You know, a lot of people, leaders in the black community, who think we still have a lot of work to do in civil rights, they don't want to hear. There is much more to hear from Dr. King's writings and his speeches. And as a matter of fact, one of the leading black intellectuals in this country, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, declared a 10-year moratorium on I Have a Dream because he wanted us to leave it and come back and discover it anew. You know, it was too familiar.
Right.
You know, and so, but if you ever get a chance to look at that speech on film, it's remarkable because he went up there with a prepared text, and at some point, and it was pretty wooden, you know. Nothing wooden about Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
You know, I mean, he was all animation. But at some point, I think it was it Mahalia Jackson who said from the background, and you can hear it, "Tell him about the dream, Martin." And you can see on the film, you know, if you watch it, that there's a moment in which you can kind of tell that he gives over his script and he starts preaching. And that is the time that he starts mentioning the dream, you know, have a dream today. And, you know, and he comes back and repeats it again. It's just amazing. So he did all that apart from his script, you know, and that's the part that we remember.
And that's in front of 250,000 people.
250,000 people. The remarkable thing about that was that all those people got there, they had that rally, they heard King, and then they went home. And it was totally...
It was very nonviolent.
Very nonviolent.
Well, that was because he went to India in 1959, I think.
Yes.
And it was by visiting Gandhi's birthplace that had a profound impact on him, and that he decided that all demonstrations should be nonviolent.
Yes.
But then, which the March on Washington was, but then there were so many others subsequent to that. I think Bloody Sunday, and then Chicago in '66, where he had a brick thrown at him, I think. Well, it was not that the demonstrators were being nonviolent, it was the protesters against the demonstrators. Is that right?
Well, there was always a lot of resistance against Dr. King's nonviolent philosophy. You know, there were always those who said, no, we need to take up arms, you know, among the black community, the protesters.
Was Malcolm X one of those?
Malcolm X was one of those. And, you know, this came especially, it was sort of unleashed after his death on April 4th, 1968. But the most iconic photos of the civil rights movement in the 60s, for example, is the one that we probably have all seen of the dog nipping at the chest of the young black man. And he has his hands down, you know. And he had been drilled along with those other ones. They went through classes and preparation training how to be nonviolent when you were attacked.
Gosh,
but he did. He learned that from Gandhi's example against the British, you know. And
yes, we have a lot to answer for.
That's right.
Us Brits.
but it really sort of sealed his whole way of being in that protest movement. And he was convinced, you know, toward the end of his life, he became more and more convinced he was not going to make it.
Well, his final speech of the day before he died, and I look over the mountaintop and I can
Yeah.
see the other side.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, for him to know that it was obviously pending,
Yeah.
that he was not going to make
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was reading that, it's like, my gosh, what insight he had.
Yeah, the mountaintop speech, and that was in Memphis, and it was given to the sanitation workers, so that by that time, Dr. King was seeing something beyond just black people in the South. He
Right.
was seeing poor people everywhere, disadvantaged people of all kinds, and that's where he was moving toward. He had even planned a Poor People's March, another march on Washington, that didn't take place during his life. But that mountaintop speech where he takes the example of Moses leading his people to the promised land, and then he goes up on the mountain and God gives him a vision of the promised land, and King says, I may not get there with you.
But I can see the other side.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so going back right before Dr. King and what life was like before, that's what the subject matter of the symposium on Monday night is about.
Yes.
Is the world Dr. King inherited and changed.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. And we have as our keynote speaker, this is the 7th annual MLK Symposium we've done. And so we're getting some history, we're
Right.
getting a little bit of grip on the subject. And this is the first one we've done where we haven't directly treated some aspect of Dr. King's life or his writings or his speaking. And this is, our keynote speaker is Isabel Wilkerson, who's written this incredible book called The Warmth of Other Suns.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, and the title is taken from some lines from Richard Wright's semi-autobiographical Black Boy, that the people leaving the South because of Jim Crow laws. Amazing. It's a little disturbing too that people don't know about this very much
Well,
anymore.
it is. And I mean, I have got to say, I have a slight girl crush on Isabel Wilkerson because she's amazing. Not only is she beautiful, and
Yeah.
she's gorgeous, and she has, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, and she has interviewed 1,200 people for this book. And I mean, she's amazing. I can't wait to meet her. But the fact that she has managed to do all of this and bring out these untold stories, I mean, I cannot wait to meet her.
Yeah, I can't either. And I'm going to ask her, one of the things I want to ask her on Monday night in the Windspear, because she's going to give her keynote address, and then I'm going to sit down with her and 2 panelists. And the first thing I'm going to ask her is, how did you choose 3 people to focus on out of those 1,200 that you interviewed so that you could tell their stories from beginning to end and make us so close to them, make them so intimate to us by the time you get through?
Well, there is so many things that I want to talk to you about in terms of the Dallas Institute itself, but MLK Symposium and Isabel Wilkerson. But just to sum up, what would you say to people wanting to come to the MLK Symposium?
I would say that it's unlike any other MLK Day celebration or commemoration you could go to, because, to put it colloquially, we dive deep into the subject. So we get into the depths of things. Not just a celebration. I mean, those are great things. Parades are great and all that, but we think that King's accomplishments are worth this kind of deep dive.
Well, I really recommend everybody to go and check out the MLK Symposium on Monday night. It's only $20, and it will be really worthwhile going to. And also, check out Dallas Institute of Humanities and Culture. They are the most wonderful group of people that you will ever hope to meet, and the most intelligent. So do go and visit MLK. And coming up straight after our break, we meet with Melina McKinnon, who's going to talk to us about the life of the late, great Stanley Marcus. Welcome back to Prime. So the second half of the show, we are going to be talking about the late, great Mr. Stanley Marcus, the former CEO of luxury retail chain Neiman Marcus. Mr. Stanley, as he was widely known, literally transformed Dallas from a rough-and-tumble cotton market town into a mecca of high fashion. We are going to be talking to the most beautiful female filmmaker in Dallas, Miss Melina McKinnon of M3 Films, LLC, who will be talking to us about the documentary that she's producing about the life of Stanley Marcus. Melina, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Always gorgeous to see you.
Oh, thank you. Happy to be here.
So I wanted just let's chat about how the project of Stanley Marcus came to you and why you decided to tell it through film.
Well, our company is called M3 Films, Making Movies with a Mission, and as mission-driven filmmakers, we're always looking for subject matter that we can share with the world that will really inspire them and educate them. And Stanley Marcus is one of the most remarkable, he's like Martin Luther King, he's just really remarkable in what he did. Not only was he internationally recognized as being one of the world's greatest retailers and a true marketing genius, he was also fought for social injustice and for women's rights, and he was an author and a publisher, and he really did transform Dallas and the retail industry. So we look forward to sharing that story with our audiences.
Well, there's so much to talk about in what he did. And touching upon what the first segment of the show was about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Stanley Marcus was the first person to end racial segregation in his store. Is that right?
Yes. To our knowledge, Stanley Marcus really was one of the leaders of helping end the racial desegregation or the segregation here in North Texas and in Dallas. The Zodiac Room was a restaurant, it still is today, at Neiman's, which in the time, it was the place to be. If you wanted to be seen, you would go to the Zodiac Room for lunch and you would dress to the nines, and it was segregated. And Stanley Marcus led the charge to have the restaurant be desegregated, and that really, he used his voice in the most subtle ways, and that was really remarkable, the way that he was able to speak to the city by just making one slight change, and it really had great ramifications.
And that's, as the social elite just held him in such huge regard, didn't they?
Well, not only, yes, the social elite, absolutely, he was dressing them and clothing them, but also Stanley impacted people from all cultures and all walks of life. He started an event at his store every October that ran for 30 years called the Fortnight, and that was actually a retail experience in that you were every year you would learn about a new country, and he would bring in art and dress and fashion and all that from a particular country. But people from all over the state and the country, no matter what your walk of life, you would come to Neiman's to experience the Fortnight.
That's it. Sounds fantastic.
It was. And he was able to, the genius of Stanley Marcus is that he was able to include a lot of the civic organizations as part of Fortnight. So he included the symphony and the opera and the schools. It's said that the limos that normally lined Main Street, of the shoppers that were coming, were replaced with the yellow school buses because the schools would come. And so it was very educational as well as being a true retail experience.
We need to do that today.
I know we do.
That would what an amazing thing to be a part of.
Truly amazing, truly amazing.
Wow, and he was is this right that he was one of the people that brought in miniskirts and decuff trousers in order to save money? Is that right? Following the war. Cotton. Okay.
Yes. Cotton. So, one of the things we need to remember as filmmakers when we're making this film that we're striving to work towards is to share with our audience that Stanley Marcus was being innovative in a time when it was challenging to be innovative. He started working at the store at the age of 26 at the end of his time at Harvard Business School in the late 20s.
Right.
So he was doing these innovations in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s when it was really, he came in and out of 2 world wars. And so during World War II, he was on a committee that was really looking at ways to help the cotton industry and what was happening with the war. And so he was part of a committee that suggested that skirts be shortened.
Amazing.
And that the cuffs be removed from pants. And as a matter of fact, at a certain point in time, three-piece suits were made illegal because of the extra use of fabric.
So you have to question whether or not the whole era of the 60s would have happened. and the mini skirt. You have to.
It may not
well,
have.
in terms of looking at the film, we have a 1-minute teaser from the trailer of the film. So let's take a quick look at that.
Okay.
And then we can come back and chat a little bit specifically about the film.
Okay? Great.
Neiman Marcus is known for its originality and its devotion to customer service, and that reputation grew to international proportions under the direction of its outspoken chairman, Stanley Marcus.
There's been this determination that whatever we do, we're going to do first class or we won't do it at all.
Stanley had enough self-confidence for 3 people, and he was unafraid, and he loved the limelight.
Everyone was in awe of Stanley Marcus.
Stanley Marcus's reputation as the merchant prince of America really opened the doors and enabled him to make Dallas really a world-renowned fashion center.
In those days, everybody had heard of Neiman Marcus, even if they didn't know anything about Dallas.
Dallas was Neiman Marcus, and Neiman Marcus was Dallas. They were interchanged.
Wow, Roger Horchow, Ebby Halliday, you have the powerful great interviewed. And this is only just at the beginning.
Just at the beginning. Stanley Marcus was so well respected throughout the world. He received, by many countries, he received the highest award that a non-citizen could receive, and he was honored by Belgium, Denmark, France, the UK,
Amazing.
Italy. And so Stanley has a plethora of people from all over the world that are eager to speak about their memories and their experiences with him. He brought greats to Dallas such as Sophia Loren, Prince Rainier, Princess Grace, Princess Margaret. So he really was exceptional, and we're very, very excited about the caliber of people we'll be able to include in our film.
So what's the plan for the film going forward?
Well, we are currently working 2 parallel paths. The first is we're in pre-production on the film, and we've done a few preliminary interviews, and we are going to be going into full production in a few months.
Right.
And the film is, we hope, will be finished at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. And the other is that we're fundraising for the film. We raise money for our documentaries through a concept called philanthropy, which is philanthropy through filmmaking. So it allows individuals who would like to participate in the film industry to do so through a charitable contribution.
Well, that's a unique concept. I don't think film has film had a concept like that before?
Well, we'd love to say we coined the phrase, but we did not coin the phrase philanthropy, but we really are bringing it to the forefront. This town especially is a great place to develop the concept of philanthropy, starting with individuals like Stanley Marcus. We just have a legacy of philanthropists in town. And so documentaries are challenging to make, and so this concept really helps get them off the ground.
Yeah, documentaries are a challenge to make. And so for you to be doing that is well, it's an inspiration to people. And also there are stories that want to be told, and people want to tell them. I mean, especially in Dallas, obviously he was known throughout the world, but people in Dallas, I mean, I don't seem to hear anybody ever say a bad word about Mr. Stanley.
Stanley Marcus was remarkable, and every single person that talks about him has just glowing things to say. He was, one of the amazing things about Stanley Marcus is that he not only did he fight for civil rights, but also for women's rights as well, and he encouraged a lot of his female employees to run for Congress and for political office. So he was just a leader and way ahead of his time.
Did any of them reach Congress or office?
One of his employees was Eddie Bernice Johnson, and he encouraged her to run for office, and she has. And so, yeah, it's pretty remarkable what he's done.
It is remarkable, isn't it? So within the philanthropy fold, what other projects do you have going on for that?
Well, M3 Films has several projects currently in development. We have the Stanley Marcus documentary. We are doing a documentary on the 80s and focusing on the 80s right now through the lens of a nightclub in Dallas, Texas called the Start Club. And that project is being led by Michael Caine and Miles Hargrove.
Now, Miles Hargrove, I think he's lovely.
He is lovely.
Sorry.
He is lovely. And then we are doing on another icon. We are, through Filmanthropy, we're working on a documentary on Horton Foote.
Okay, great.
It's called The Man from Morton. And then we have another film called Miracle Fishing, which actually focuses on a kidnapping in Colombia and how a family, the Hargrove family, actually was impacted by having their father, held hostage for almost a year.
Yes, well, that's a whole other story unto itself.
Yes,
and
it
so
is.
we will have to get you back on here to talk about that for future.
We would love that.
But in terms of, just to sum up, for somebody who wants to become involved in making movies with a mission or philanthropy, how would you tell people, how would you urge people to get involved?
Well, we have a great website, so m3filmsllc.com, and then the Philanthropy Fund is housed at the Dallas Foundation, so they can reach out to us through our website. Jason Cerrone is our in-house business development producer, so he'll be happy to take anybody's calls and answer questions.
Fantastic. And would you recommend being a filmmaker? So for somebody coming out of school, would you say if this is what you want to do, you absolutely have to follow it because it has given me everything that I ever wanted?
I think if you have the desire to be an artist, that you have to follow your dream in order to be happy.
Yes, that's a good piece of
So
advice.
I think if you really want to be an artist, you should follow your dream for sure.
Well, I love that. Well, Melina McKinnon is one of the most gracious filmmakers you could ever hope to meet. So do go and check out m3filmsllc.com and contact Melina or Jason, and so they will be able to give you any information about philanthropy, making movies with a mission, any of that. But that's it for our show right now. So Larry, Melina, thank you so much for your pearls of wisdom.
Thank you.
And join us next week for Baby It's Cold Outside. It will be a great show. I'm Emily Hargrove, and thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.